Hey there, everybody. It's Deborah Irene coming to you today with story time. And it's been a while since I've told you a story. I've had a few author things that I've been busy with. I had a couple of book signings and presentations, and it's been good to get back out on the weekends and be able to do some of those things. Today, I want to continue reading from my mother's book, Helen's Heritage. We've been paying tribute to her since she passed away a little over a year ago, and reading at the back of the book the section called The Clan, where she pays tribute to her entire family, her mother, her father, and her siblings. And so today we're going to read about one of her sisters, Clara Opal. Again, coming to you today with story time, stories and lessons my mother taught me, and this is from her book, Helen's Heritage, at the back of the book. The title is Clara Opal, and let me show you pictures of her. She was a beauty like most of the Herbert women were when they were younger. You can look at that picture of her, and then this is a picture of some of her children with her and her husband Lee. And then over here we have a picture of her and Lee in their later years. And I apologize if you can hear the sirens here. I've mentioned on some of my other videos that I live on a very busy street and it's still kind of rush hour traffic, so I apologize for the background noise there. But let's continue reading about Clara. Clara Opal was born on March 3, 1911. She was the fifth child and third daughter. She married Carl de Rosset in Missouri as a young woman, and they had 5 children. Clara was yet another mother figure to me. Her daughter Evelyn was my age, and we were playmates until they moved to California in the 1940s. Mama made the trip with them as they all headed west for a new life. Clara was especially close with Mama and my sister Louise. After moving to California, Clara and Carl divorced. Clara later married Lee Coker. After I moved to California, again, this is my mother speaking in her voice. After I moved to California, we were together much. We both loved fishing and went on overnight camping, fishing trips with our husbands. She was with me for the birth of all of my daughters, and I'll talk a little more about that in a second. She was a wonderful cook, and we all enjoyed taco nights at her house and playing cards. Clara and Lee loved to dance, and everyone cleared the floor to watch them two-step and I-step. After Charles and I moved to Missouri, we enjoyed Clara and Lee's visits and realized how much we missed them. She was a jolly person and had a crazy laugh. They visited us during Charles's first surgery, and she was concerned about me. She said she missed my laugh. She seemed to get skinnier the older she got. I felt sorry for her and the many problems she had to deal with. And this was mostly in her younger years. But 3 of her adult children preceded her in death: Leon, Richard, and Flora. I know that was hard for her. Clara and Lee retired to Topeka, Arizona, and lived out the end of their lives there. She had various health issues later in life: heart, lungs, strokes. Clara died before Lee on September 14, 1988. Eunice and I flew into Las Vegas, then rented a car and drove to Topeka for her funeral. She was cremated, and her ashes were scattered near the Colorado River, the place they loved. A few years later, Lee's ashes were scattered in the same area. And her children were Herbert Leon, and we knew him as Leon. He was born in 1931, passed away in 1982. Evelyn Ruth was still alive when my mother wrote her stories, this book, and she was born in 1933, the year before my mother. And I don't have written down right here when she passed away, but I believe it was in 2017 or 18. Alvin Richard, whom we all called Richard, was born in 1936, and we had a hard time finding his date of death, but we think it was 1987. And then Shirley Sue was born in 1937 and died in 2008. And the baby Flora Margaret, it was really sad. Flora was not quite 40 years old. She was born in 1940 and passed away in 1979. I remember all of Aunt Clara's children. So let me just say a few more words about her. As I've stated before, I feel really privileged having lived half of my childhood in California, where I got to know my mother's brothers and sisters, the ones that had settled out there, and then also got to know my aunts and uncles who stayed in Missouri. So I feel very fortunate about that. Now, Aunt Clara, I have a very vivid memory of her. In fact, I even talk about her a little bit in my book, Reflections. You know, my mother stated in her stories about her that she had I called it a cackle, a funny laugh, and she laughed about a lot of things, but she was there at the birth of each one of her children. Let me tell you about the birth of my sister Kathy, who's just next to me, younger, almost 4 years younger than I am. So I remember when Kathy was born, and the little hospital in Santa Paula that she was born in. And I wanted so much to go up to the hospital and see my mother and see the new baby. And Aunt Clara took me up there. So she takes me back to the nursery area where the babies who had been delivered recently were behind the glass windows. And there were 2 babies that had been delivered recently. And there was a baby who had a very fair complexion, and that was my sister Kathy. And very little hair. The hair she had was like cotton. And then there was a beautiful little Mexican baby next to her. And I asked my Aunt Clara which one was my sister. And she said, well, the one over there on the left. And of course it was the baby with the fair complexion and the little bit of white cotton hair. And I remember being very upset. I wanted to take the other baby home. I wanted the baby with black hair and the darker skin. And Aunt Clara cackled. That's what I called it. She thought that was just hilarious that I wanted to take the other baby home. So that's kind of a funny little story. Those of you, my cousins, second cousins, third cousins who are in California, I want you to know the role that Aunt Clara played in your being there. And this is also in the earlier chapters of my mother's book, Helen's Heritage. When my grandmother, my mother's mother, Rhoda Margaret, decided to go to California to start a new life in the 40s, she rode out there with Clara and her husband, her first husband, Leon. No, that was her son. Carl was his name, Carl DeRosset. So Grandma rode out there with them. And so if it were not for Clara, I'm not sure when Grandma would have been able to go or if she would have gone. So Clara played a pretty vital role in that, and all of you cousins who are in California. She still has some descendants there and a few other places. We don't hear much from them, but I think some of them might be in our face group. And so I hope that you listen to this video about your grandmother, Clara, my Aunt Clara. She also, as my mother stated, was an excellent cook, and she loved to fish, and I remember going on a camping trip or two, and she and her husband were just so much fun. Lee Coker. Another thing about Aunt Clara, let me tell you one other little funny story. When we were in California, I was probably 5 years old, maybe 4 or 5. I, for some reason, was quizzing my mother if she got spanked as a child, and she said, well, of course I got spanked. My poppy disciplined me, and sometimes my older sisters, who were like my mother, had to discipline me. And I said, well, like who? And I don't remember if she said Clara or if I asked Clara. Anyways, it was made known to me that Aunt Clara had spanked my mother, and that really upset me. And I said, I want to call her up and talk to her. So I don't remember if my mother dialed the phone, but I'm sure she was getting a chuckle out of this. Or if I dialed it, I was probably old enough to know how to dial the phone. And I called up Aunt Clara and I said, hey, I just want to know, did you spank my mommy, when she was a little girl? Clara said something like, why, yes, I did, because she needed it, and I could spank her today too. Anyways, they got a big laugh out of that, but I was upset with my Aunt Clara for spanking my mommy. She was a good aunt. She was a funny aunt, and as my mother stated, she felt sorry for her for some of the problems that she had in her younger years, but you would have never known that because she had a sense of humor and joy about her, and some days I wish I were more like Aunt Clara. So this is Deborah Irene with Story Time, with stories and lessons from my mother, and we read about her sister Clara Opal. I hope you enjoyed learning about her today, and we'll see you soon.